It's a big argument, and I'm going to try and summarize it in 15 minutes. We wanted to look at the state of the world, and in particular the shift of power from the Atlantic to the Pacific, hence the emphasis on oceans. And the first third or so of the document is basically a history of the global economy in a few pages. You see a combination of innovation and economic growth providing global leadership, first of all for Atlantic countries, Britain and then Germany briefly, and then the United States. And what we'll see in the next century is, given the rise of Pacific Asia, is much more influence in the Pacific Asian area, not to the exclusion of necessarily of the Atlantic societies, but a big growth in influence. We will see what happens to global leadership, but the beginning of the global leadership argument is innovation drives the economy drives influence, and influence gives global leadership. So this innovation framework looks at the characteristics of innovative individuals, teams, organizations, and societal culture. And what you see is you need obviously well-educated, imaginative people, but you also need diversity, people who are inquisitive, people who are willing to challenge, people who don't just accept things as they are, but ask questions. And that gets reflected at each level in this. If getting innovation absolutely central to an economy in the 21st century is important, what does that mean for an education system? This slide, some of you will have seen before because I've been using it for a while, is about what are the characteristics currently of great education systems like Singapore and Hong Kong, Korea, Finland, Ontario and Canada. Under the standards and accountability, it's very clear about globally benchmarking standards. So if you say somebody's good at maths in Toronto, would they be good at maths in Singapore, London, Tokyo? Data and accountability, data to drive decision making and to inform accountability. Maybe all of that is public, as with league tables in England, or maybe it's all slightly less public, but nevertheless out there. And then the third thing there is making sure that every child's on the agenda, not letting some children fall behind. Then in the middle, there's the whole stuff about human capital. You need to get great people into teaching. You need to make sure they get better all the time, not just get trained well at the beginning, but they're continuously learning. And in order to make that happen, you need great school leadership. The third panel is a set of things to do with effective organisations. And in some countries, you see attempts at good reform, but led by a department that is not up to the job. That happened in Ontario 10 years ago, and they made a big reform of the department. It happened in England when I was working for Blair. We completely reorganised the way the Department for Education worked back then. This again is a theme I've been talking about for a while, but we explained it better than we've done before in Oceans of Innovation. Well-educated doesn't just mean the K, which is knowledge, although that is important. It also means learning to think, which is the T. To think in teams, to think on your own, to think reflectively, to think fast, to think under pressure, to think creatively, deductively, inductively, all the different ways you can think. Not in a separate lesson, but all teachers, whether they're teaching maths or English or history, or they're a primary teacher and they teach all of that, explicitly teaching children how to think, making that clear to the children how they were thinking about a problem. And then the L is leadership, being able to influence people. So at the end of a school education, you'd like every child to have some knowledge, significant knowledge, and K in this equation stands for knowing what, so knowing content, but also knowing how, skills. So you want children to have some K, you definitely want them to have some T, and you want them to have some L, because if you have knowledge and you're able to think and you're able to influence people, which is what we mean by leadership, then you can really shape the world around you. And outside the bracket is the E, which is the ethical underpinning, the set of values which are essential for the success of the 21st century. There are lots of different places in the education sector where you can innovate, and this slide is from my friend and the innovation guru Charlie Ledbetter. So you can, within the formal learning, so within a traditional school, you can continuously improve, and we see schools all around the world doing that. So that's his first box. If you go down a bit, you can, within the traditional school, you can transform the way the school works. The school that I was talking to the principal of not long ago, where they've basically done away with the timetable altogether. Students make appointment with teachers. There are various group learning settings, and that the whole way the school day works has been completely transformed. So that principle has reinvented school in a disruptive ways, delivering great results. But then there's also learning outside of school, and think what I just said about the learning day. So you can have supplementary classes and opportunities. In Singapore and Korea and places like that, there's a lot of emphasis on exam prep after school. But in Singapore, they're now saying, including the Prime Minister, who wrote a foreword for Oceans of Innovation, is saying, well, hang on a minute, parents. Are you sure you just want to do exam prep? What about music? What about drama? What about art? What about sport and so on as supplementary education? And how can that be connected in? And how could you transfer some of the learning currently happens in school, out of school? Big experiments in some parts of the developing world in that area. And then in the bottom right-hand corner, if you have informal learning that is disruptive, you can go beyond, should it be sport or should it be exam prep or extra literacy, to a completely different way of providing the entire education experience, as is happening very radically at the university level currently, where the so-called MOOCs are showing ways of replacing large swathes of what we currently call university education. And then the last slide is just to enable you to contact me on Twitter if you want to follow up. We try and run some of this debate through Twitter in a continuous way, and you'd be welcome to join in. And for the next 35 minutes or so, you're very welcome to ask questions, join in the debate, whatever you want. I think that Zhao, he makes a point that we need to take account of, but I think it is fundamentally a false dichotomy. In other words, and I hope this is clear in the paper, we're not saying we throw out everything in PISA in order to replace it. That graph that we publish in Oceans of Innovation is very subjective. So if you look at the UAE students are saying they're really good at innovation, but you don't see that in the economy. They think they are, but they're probably not. Similarly, the people in Singapore, maybe the young people may be rather good at innovation, but because they know being good at maths is really difficult, they think they're not as good as they actually are. So there's a big subjective element in it. Nevertheless, there is a real point there that if you're just testing the K in my graph and a bit of the T, you're missing a bigger picture if you want an innovative economy. And the key thing on any of these things is never to depend solely on one indicator, but to look at a balance. So if you want to know how well the British economy or the Spanish economy is doing, you need to know GDP, inflation, unemployment, and the stock market. 4 indicators will tell you how well the economy is doing, or badly. But any one of them would mislead you. And it's the same with the school system. No system has yet made that shift fully. And one way to ensure we won't make the shift is to set that up as a false dichotomy, to say we're going to do all this new stuff and knowledge doesn't matter anymore. I read stuff in England sometimes written by academics who claim to be serious that somehow knowledge doesn't matter anymore because we've got Google. I mean, this is complete nonsense, really. So you can look things up on Google, of course, but having a kind of framework of how the world changed, if you think about it in history, or understanding the key concepts of mathematics, those are not things that you can look up on Google. So knowledge doesn't. So one way to have failed to make the change is to set up a false dichotomy. And since Oceans of Innovation came out, I've had conversations with education ministers and leaders around the world, people like Dalton McGuinty in Ontario, the Minister of Education in Singapore, who's a really great guy, the Minister of Education in Hong Kong, the Prime Minister of Australia, and then people here in England. And none of them, so all of them understand that they want to make this change, but they don't want to lose the focus on ensuring high standards in mathematics, the national language, and English. They know that that is really important as well. I mean, every teacher is in a position to improve what they do in their classroom, even if they were just working alone, and certainly if they're collaborating with others. Even if you've got a bad principal, you've got that opportunity. And so that's, you think of that as the kind of minimum opportunity. And then 2 of the boxes are about what's happening outside the school day. And again, the teacher can have some influence over that. Here I don't know the answers yet, but this is what I would do if I was in a school. If I was a school principal tomorrow, this is what I'd do. In a teacher's records of the students, which in my day when I was a teacher would have been in a mark book, but is now online no doubt in every school. So you'd list the names of the student, then you'd list under K the key subject areas and their progress, and then you'd have a T, and you'd have their progress on, maybe 4 different types of thinking, and then you'd have an L, were they learning to be influential, to persuade people? So you might have 5 knowledge areas, 3 thinking areas, and 2 leadership areas in a mark book. But obviously it would be online, and then you would be recording, were these students learning the things? When we say L, which we describe in Notions of Innovation, are the students learning that? And then once a quarter, if I was a principal, I'd get my senior management team together, and I'd spend half a day going through the whole school roll. And I'd say, this boy, is he learning to lead? When did we last see him demonstrate leadership? And if nobody can remember, I'd say, right, what are we going to do about it? Whose job is it? And let's check. And so regardless of the system and accountability at school level, simply by putting those things on the agenda, you'll generate a debate. And after a while, the school will become conscious of when different pupils get opportunities to lead, of the different kinds of thinking that need to be embedded in the curriculum. So I would start at the school level, recording it, and generate debate and try and get a common language at the school level. And we could do something similar at system level, but actually I think a lot of the interesting work could start at school level. The true answer is I don't know what's going to happen, but here's some thoughts about it. In Singapore, let's start. It's rather different in the different countries. So in Singapore, the Prime Minister, there was an election about a year ago in Singapore, and unusually for Singapore, the ruling party didn't win all the seats. I think they lost 3 or 4 seats in the assembly, which is a big shock to them. And they are responding to that. So they've appointed more younger people into ministerial positions, and they've got this whole program running right across government called the Singapore Conversation, and the ministers are all of them being encouraged to be in dialogue with the citizens of Singapore, and instead of, exactly as you say, being very top down, as we describe in Oceans of Innovation, in Lee Kuan Yew's day, they thought about it among experts, they made a decision, they tried it. If it worked, so that was good. If it didn't work, they tried something else. So it was actually a perfect example of pragmatic, evidence-based decision making. But it didn't engage people, involve people, but people liked it because on the whole it worked. It was an uncorrupt society. They made big progress. So they've got this Singapore Conversation, and the Prime Minister is now really advocating, as in the forward to Oceans of Innovation, changing the way children are taught, and the Education Minister has that as a big theme. Hong Kong has a pretty vibrant, interactive democracy anyway, because it's got this odd combination of British and Chinese heritage. And so there the minister's constantly being attacked in public and he gets yelled at. He learns all the stuff that you learn when you're a politician in Britain or America or Spain, no doubt. You learn if you're in Hong Kong. And then in China, they're a long way back. I don't know what will happen. It'll be very interesting till we get a measure of the new leadership that was elected last month. They say the right things, but you don't see it happening either in the schools or indeed in the society more broadly. When we were writing Oceans of Innovation, we started searching the web for things. We even found that the education minister in North Korea was talking about creativity. But you can see that using the words and actually doing it are a totally different thing. In Japan, they're really thinking about this too as well. So they're very different societies. And obviously one of the problems with Oceans of Innovation is we're talking about a whole region, but that each one of them is quite different. But the common theme is that in order to be the leaders of the 21st century and to solve the big global problems, they will need to overcome this hurdle that we're talking about. And each of them is thinking about it in a different way. And I don't think it's at all certain that they will overcome that barrier, but they're definitely thinking about it and trying to do that in different ways in different parts of the Pacific region. I'm serious about encouraging you and lots of people in your network to join the debate about oceans of innovation. We've got another paper coming out in a month or so about the future of higher education called An Avalanche is Coming. We like geographical metaphors, and we would love to engage you in debate. So if there are ways that you in different parts of the world can distribute the paper, get people engaging on Twitter, I will keep being in dialogue with you in the network because you're my favourite people in the education systems around the world. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. We'll be sure to follow that invitation.